Down here, hurry! Come on, move it!
What the fuck did I do wrong? Tell me!
Appreciate you clicking on this review. Last night I got to bust and check out a screening for Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, and with this sequel we follow our heroes 2 years after Ghostbusters Afterlife. They have moved to the Big Apple, New York, reopened the firehouse, and are now constantly busting ghosts. Everything seems to be going alright until a mysterious artifact lands at their doorstep, unleashing an ancient and chilling ghost upon New York. That's all pretty much. Not any spoilers to you guys. This will be a spoiler-free review. Another Ghostbuster movie, man. You know, it really sucks to say it, and I've been saying it to the lead up of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, but feels like no one cares. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm fully aware there's a dedicated fan base that absolutely loves Ghostbusters, but the enthusiasm for the franchise, I feel, just isn't there anymore. I feel like there's going to be a lot of people commenting, oh crap, I forgot this was even coming out this weekend, because Sony wasn't even doing the best job marketing this movie. And that kind of breaks my heart as a Ghostbuster fan, because obviously I watched these movies as a kid and really fell in love with them. I survived through the trauma and turmoil that was the 2016 Ghostbuster movie, where that seemed like Ghostbuster talk was at its highest, but mainly for controversial reasons. To see it now get to a point where it's like, oh yeah, it's a new Ghostbuster movie coming out. What's for lunch? Is again a little sad. But the trailers for this actually seem to be pretty interesting. It looks like they were no longer going to rely on nostalgia. They were introducing a brand new villain. We're back in New York City. The firehouse is open. They're driving the Ecto-1. It felt like a classic Ghostbuster adventure, and that's what I was most excited to see here. My biggest fear, though, with this movie is not that it would be bad, is that it would just turn out to be fine. It would just be okay. And that's mainly because I feel like we need an amazing standout Ghostbuster movie to reignite some of the hype around this franchise, and if we get something that's just meh or okay, that's not really gonna do much to teeter-totter people either way. And well, after having seen the movie, my fears were slightly confirmed. Now don't get me wrong, for Ghostbuster fans, there is gonna be a lot in here for you to like the movie, heck, even maybe fall in love with it. There's actually a lot of things myself that they did in this movie that I was really surprised with, that I thought they were taking risks in the right direction, but it all kind of came down to execution and how you feel about some strong plot points in here. I'll jump into that in a sec, but let me get into the positives here. For one, I love the direction of this movie. While Afterlife I thought was a good way to step back into this universe, pay respect to Harold Ramis, introduce new characters while really telling a story that reminded people of the first Ghostbuster movie, this is kind of the Ghostbuster film I've been wanting for a long time. Just a classic adventure back in New York City, not having to rely too much on nostalgia, bringing in a brand new ghost with some new mythology and lore. Yes, I felt like this was the way to go. I even saw the creative team of this movie, Jason Reitman and Gil Kinnan, say that they took inspiration from the real Ghostbusters TV show. That's kind of what inspired them here, is they wanted to introduce a new villain that you would see like on that show. But not just that, the aesthetic that they continue to have that feels very much connected to the first two movies. Things when it comes to the special effects, the way the ghosts look, like Slimer in particular, I love that they use a mix of modern and old effects to bring back to life what Slimer looks like. It's that kind of attention to detail that feels really nice. Even the gadgets they throw in here. As a collectible freak, looking at all the new gadgets they throw in here, from RC ghost traps, drone ghost traps, nice new red jackets, new proton packs. There's an entire scene dedicated to a Ghostbusters lab, and all of that I found myself so invested in. And just like with the original Ghostbuster movie, I feel like this one stays true to the comedy. That original Ghostbuster movie is a bit of a phenomenon because I've seen people online argue that the first movie should have never been a franchise. That the first Ghostbuster film is a comedy first and foremost, it just had really cool, interesting ideas. And while I don't totally agree with those people, I do believe a Ghostbuster movie must include some sort of comedy. And yeah, with people like Kumani Nanjiel in here, Paul Rudd, Patton Oswalt, James Acaster, yeah, you're gonna be chuckling quite a few times throughout the course of this movie. I touched upon this already, but I still want to elaborate a little further, the risks that they took in this movie. Because I mentioned Afterlife really relied relied on nostalgia and retreading story points from the original movie where it felt like 80% nostalgia, 20% new stuff. In Frozen Empire, that's switched around. It's 80% new stuff with about 20% nostalgia. You're gonna get callbacks to lines and Easter eggs thrown out there, familiar ghosts that you remember from the first two movies, and that's gonna make the experience a lot more fun for diehard fans. But to me, it was really the moments where they were doing new things, where they were adding new history into the Ghostbusters world. I found myself in moments really enticed with the idea of this new ice villain, Garaka. That was one of the things I liked about Ghostbusters 2, although it has its flaws. Finding out the mystery behind the haunted painting and the eerie feeling you got, uncovering why this being is around, why it's lurking, why it's threatening. I enjoyed that aspect of the movie. There's also new ghosts thrown in here that I thought actually made the world feel more fun. There's this one red dot ghost, I believe is named Possessor, and just the things that they're able to do with that one entity, I was like, oh, that's really fun. And so you hear me kind of gushing on a lot of elements of this movie, and you're starting to think, is it just fine? It's starting to sound like a pretty great Ghostbuster movie to me. Let's then get into the stuff I'm kind of mixed to negative on. Starting off with the mixed side of things, there's a lot of ideas and concepts they throw into Frozen Empire that I appreciate. These are the kind of risks that, yes, I feel the franchise should be taking, adding on to the lore, doing something a little new and different, but with those risks comes the possibility that it's not always executed right. And I think it'll really come down to preference. There's going to be two major plot points thrown in here that I'm not going to ruin for spoiler purposes, but they were pretty much left out of the trailer. One involves a story plot point with McKenna Grace's character. She, being one of the youngest members of this Ghostbusters team, is being told you can't really be on the team yet, you're a little too young, we shouldn't have you out there chasing ghosts. And so she starts to feel isolated, alone, left out, and she befriends somebody in this movie. And that friendship, to me, I think, was the most unexpected part of Frozen Empire. There were parts of it where I was like, oh, I see what you're doing in here. That's interesting. I like it. And then I think it drags on. And then it starts to stop working for me. It gets a little cliche and it doesn't have the emotional impact I think the movie was wanting. And I think that's going to be the most like controversial or like iffy plot point for a lot of people. Another one is involving Kumail Nanjiani's character. There's more to him than just cracking jokes in this movie. And again, it was another idea that I was like, oh, I like what you're doing here. That's an interesting concept. The history behind it, I think, works for this universe, but towards the third act, it goes a little off the rails, starts to feel like, is this really Ghostbusters? This feels like this belongs in a different universe. But it was a risk, like I said, that the movie was willing to take, and I do appreciate it taking those risks. Along with that, I think also the biggest downfall of Frozen Empire is it's overstuffed. There are too many characters in here, and the movie tries to give each character some sort of spotlight that it feels like it overcomplicates things. There's too much going on. You start jumping back and forth from character to character. The movie begins to feel messy. I like that they have the legacy cast in here. They're not hidden in the trailers. You know they're included in there. But along with the legacy characters, you have the returning characters from Afterlife. And along with them, you have the new faces for Frozen Empire. And you could just feel the movie has maybe stretched itself a little too thin. Some people are given really nice arcs like McKenna Grace and even Paul Rudd. And then there's other people like Finn Wolfhard that is barely given an arc and almost feels like they fade into the background of this movie a little bit. I also felt it was odd the way they went about using the legacy characters. I remember when Afterlife came out, it was a big discussion. Are they going to be in the movie? Are they going to show up? Oh my God, they're there. How cool. Here it's like, they're just there. Bill Murray will pop up in a random scene. We won't see him for 30 minutes, then he'll pop up again. Same thing with Annie Potts' character. It's nice to have them included and be part of this story, but aside from Ernie Hudson and Dan Aykroyd, a lot of the legacy characters were just randomly thrown in here. Another thing I think is going to let people down is the villain. Now, the villain himself is pretty badass, and there's a great build up to him. I like the mythology behind him, the story, his powers, his look, but unfortunately the build up to this villain and him taking full reign takes a long time in this movie. And unfortunately, since the movie kind of does a good job of building up this threat and this villain and why we should all be scared of it being let loose on the town, once it gets let loose, does its thing, and has its fight with the Ghostbusters, it's a little anticlimactic. It goes by a little too fast, then the movie's over and you're like, wow, all that buildup just for that? And that's really what Ghostbusters Frozen Empire comes down to. It's a bit of a mixed bag. For longtime fans who just wanted a new Ghostbuster movie with a nice fun adventure, there's gonna be enough in here to redeem it for you and make it a good movie. But unfortunately, it's just not that Ghostbuster movie that's gonna knock it out of the park, take the franchise to that next step. So with Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, I'm gonna give action 3 stars. There's a lot of ghost busting action in here. I will say though, not a fan of daytime ghost busting sequences. This is one of those franchises where I think you do need to balance the horror and comedy, and just the amount of like daytime sequences in here with catching ghosts and the non-threatening feel of some of these ghosts now, I just feel like lets the world lose its magic a little bit. Comedy in the movie, I'm gonna give it 3.5 stars. I thought this was a really funny Ghostbuster movie. I caught myself laughing quite a few times, especially to Kumail Nanjiani, but Paul Rudd also does his job carrying this movie and just being this energetic guy whenever he's on screen. Drama in the movie, I'm gonna give it 3 stars. I feel like there was enough risks in here, enough new ideas, some new Ghostbusters mythology thrown in for it to be fun, but I felt some of the shortcomings and just interesting plot directions, like I said with McKenna Grace and that one friend she makes throughout this movie, holds the film back just a little bit. Horror in the movie, I'll give 1.5 star. It's still a family-friendly Ghostbuster movie. There's a couple of horrific ghost-looking designs, and even the main villain himself is terrifying, but I think it never really gets to that point where you're truly gonna be scared. And suspense in the movie, I'm gonna give it 2.5 stars. With that lighthearted tone, a lot of the elements become predictable. You know where it's headed and what's going to happen. Casual fans into the Ghostbusters universe, I'm gonna give it a B+. Cinephiles, I'm gonna give it a B-. And critically, I'm going to give it a C+. For me, since the positives outweighed the negatives in this movie, I think Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is still worth checking out in theaters. Again, that's just my opinion on the movie, guys. Like I said, as a big Ghostbuster fan, I just kind of wanted more from this movie. I wanted it to be excellent. And although it's not to that level of great, excellent, it's still entertaining, it's still enjoyable, it's a fun adventure. There's just gonna be hiccups along the way. I'll most definitely be doing a spoiler review for this because there's things I want to get into that I just couldn't talk about in this review, so look out for that. But don't forget to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at 3C Films or on TikTok at 3C Films. But as always, I'm Chris. Take care.